Hello everyone. This is just by way of a short introduction to a new playlist that I want to introduce to my channel. I've had my channel for, I don't know, about 7 or 8 months now, and it's doing quite well. Thank you very much to everyone who's subscribed. The thing I'm very aware of though is that my intention was to make it basically a historically themed channel, and by far and away the most popular element of my channel has been the wargaming side, and that's great. I enjoy wargaming enormously, but I'm a bit conscious that I might be not catering to some of my earlier subscribers who may have subscribed to my channel for more for the outdoors videos that I make, and the gardens, historic gardens, and basically out and about visiting historic sites. But one thing I've been particularly keen to do on the channel, which I haven't got around to so far, is a section on naval history and basically anything to do with the sea and the history of the merchant navy, the various navies of the world. And that will incorporate, because I actually wargame a lot of naval games, that will incorporate wargaming, but it's not going to be a solely wargaming playlist. There's going to be a lot of discussion about the history as well, and in particular I'll be putting up film of various places that I visit, ships that I visit and so on, areas of naval interest, not least being Plymouth itself, where I live, which is obviously a city that's got long connections with the Royal Navy, and I'm very close to other areas of the country, such as Falmouth, which I visited recently, which has a splendid maritime museum there. It's a sort of annex of the National Maritime Museum in Greenwich, which I also visited actually quite recently last year. So I do tend to get out and about a little bit, visiting all these places. So I wanted to turn I've created a new playlist which I've just titled Maritime Matters, and it's going to be a sort of an amalgam of my wargaming playlist and the out and about playlist, and I'm also going to incorporate reviews of books and so on, DVDs, that kind of thing, TV programs. So it's going to have quite a wide scope, and of course it's going to cover an enormous period of history. So my interest isn't really confined to one period of history. I've managed to accumulate quite a large collection of books over the years to do with various periods and conflicts. As a backdrop to this video, I've just got out a few of my favourite books. This book here is the story of Graf Spee's raiders. This is during the First World War, and Graf Spee commanded the German, was it called, I think it might have been called the Pacific Squadron or the Far East Squadron. It was basically stationed in Tsingtao, which was a German colony, one of these what were they called, like franchise ports, similar to Britain and Hong Kong. Germany at the beginning of the 20th century had a concession in Tsingtao, and when war broke out he was cut off really from Europe. All the Allied powers closed in particular Japan, which fought on the Allied side during the First World War, closed in on the port, and they had to basically leave the port. A lot of the smaller cruisers split off and had amazing stories attached to virtually all of them. The Emden was a very successful commerce raider, and was a real flea in the ear to the Allies in the Far East. It shelled Madras, it sank various Russian and I think a French ship in Malaya, and it was eventually tracked down by an Australian ship, HMAS Sydney, and sunk at the Cocos Islands. But that was just one ship out of this squadron. There was the Königsberg, which eventually took refuge in the Rufiji Delta in East Africa, and that was the story of that was basically the plot of what was it called? I've forgotten. It starred Lee Marvin and I think Roger Moore, and they were attempting to sink this German battleship that was harbouring in this river delta. The name of the film has escaped my mind now. There was the Dresden, which eventually, after I think basically the squadron had a major victory over the British at the Battle of Coronel, but then sailed around the Cape of Good Hope and encountered another British fleet that had come to deal with it at the Falklands and was sunk. But one of those ships, the Dresden, managed to escape, and that went back to the Pacific. I can't remember the name of the island, but it basically stopped to do repairs in this island, and there was a British sailor who had somehow managed to get marooned on this island, and he basically took pot shots at the German crew from the hillside above where the ship was docked, and slowed down their repairs to such an extent that the Allies managed to catch up with the Dresden and sink it. And the guy, I think he won the VC for it, because at one stage the Dresden actually turned its main guns on where it thought this guy was hiding. And there is a film of that. Again, I've forgotten the name of the film. There was a film of that made in around the 1950s, I believe. Old black and white film. That's just one book, one subject. I mean, other books that I've really enjoyed. This is a book called Shattered Sword by Partial and Tully, Jonathan Partial and Anthony Tully, and it's a new take on the Battle of Midway. It's a superb read, absolutely superb read. Goes into such detail in terms of the differing philosophies about how aircraft carriers should be built, and the reasons why the Pacific fleets had such light armour, and so on, and the whole story of the Battle of Midway. And a different take on it as well. They have a different take on the episode where the Japanese changed their mind about how to arm the planes, and then get caught in the middle of changing the armament by US dive bombers. I love just looking at images of ships and so on. So I mean, this book here is just photographs of the old Imperial Russian Navy, and I just think they're things of beauty. The old pre-dreadnought ships and dreadnought ships. I mean, what a shame that there are so few of them left, preserved in harbours and so on. I could go on forever about this. I love all the the detail and the statistics and so on. This book is a compilation of the details of all the ships of the Royal Navy from 1688 through to 1860. So you can look up all kinds of manner of detail on the ships, what happened to them, their history, when they finally were broken up or sunk or whatever. It's just great. I can get absorbed in it for ages. This is a book that I bought recently, which is it's simply an atlas of the First World War naval actions. So it shows you in detail all the various campaigns and naval actions. In here somewhere will be that action I was just talking to you about, the Emden. To give you an example. Look it up in there. Try not to take too much time doing this. That's probably 2021. Yeah, well that's the whole story. Emden sunk there, it's right on the edge of the map, at the Caicos Islands. Anyway, enough about that. So, as I say, the other element of it is going to be principally the wargaming side of it, and then my outdoor kind of reports, as it were. So wargaming wise, I've got model ships in all kinds of scales and periods. This is, I can get it over it, quite heavy. These are a section of the kind of rules that I have. Victory at Sea. I haven't actually ever played this set of rules, because my preferred set of rules for the modern era by far is Sea Creek 5, which is a whole video in itself really describing those rules, but they are just incredible, absolutely incredible. They're just packed full of research and statistics and data, but the rules themselves operate in a really easy manner. So the authors have done a brilliant job of contracting all the research they've done down into a very nice game mechanism. But some of the things you can find in here are just extraordinary. See if I can give you an example. Yeah, here there's a list of the phonetic alphabets that all the various navies of the world used. So you have the old Maritime, the USA, various US versions of the alphabet, German and English through the years. There's also somewhere in here a way of working out what the weather conditions were like in any part of the world at any season of the year. Descriptions of the Beaufort scale, all that kind of thing. It's just there extra, so it's brilliant for anyone who's interested in naval wargaming. You don't have to be even interested in these rules. There's loads of statistics in here you can use for making up your own campaigns and so on. So basically, as soon as I discovered these rules, I've never played another set of naval rules since. I can highly recommend those. But there's all kinds of other periods. There's Osprey bringing out this is a pirate game, which is sort of bordering on maritime affairs. But they've also got a game called Fighting Sail, I believe, which I haven't tried out yet. There's Rod Langton's rules for Fighting Sail, Signal for Close Action, which I use quite a lot. But my preferred set of rules for that is actually a very plain and simple thing. It's an old hexed board game called Wooden Ships and Iron Men, which I play with model ships rather than the card counters on a hexed mat, and I've had some great games with that. Just goes on and on. There are rules for American Civil War, Riverine navies, another Waddlington set of rules for the Renaissance galleys. This is another good Age of Sail set of rules by Warhammer Historical, which unfortunately Warhammer historical games aren't marketed anymore. Another pirate game there by Warhammer Historical again, Legends of the High Seas again, no longer available. In here we've got another Action Under Sail. I played that once and I ended up with a headache, so I've never played it since. It was a lot of... I was being tutored in it by a chap, and he had to resort to a calculator quite a lot of the time. So then I'll show you some of the models that I have. Right, well I just had to take a break for a while because my phone rang. So while I was away, I just checked up on Wikipedia a couple of the things that I'd forgotten that I was talking to you about previously. So just to sort of clarify, the story of the Dresden was taken up by C.S. Forester, who wrote a book called Brown on Resolution in 1926, and that is the story of a British sailor who spoils the repairs of the German cruiser, which is then successfully sunk by the Allies. So the Dresden was sunk in that manner, but there was no factual character on the island. That's just my misinterpretation, taking Hollywood films as historic fact, whereas in fact it was based on a well-researched novel by the author C.S. Forester, who was also the author of the Hornblower stories. So I got that slightly wrong, but the film that I was on about was one. There were two versions of the film. One starred John Mills, was made in 1935, and that was called Brown on Resolution. And the other one was made in 1953 and has various titles. One is Sailor of the King, and the other is Single-Handed. And I'm not sure which film I've seen. Could have been either of those, but it's a really, really good film. It's really worth watching out for. And the film that was made based on the story of the sinking of the Königsberg in the refugee delta in East Africa, that starred Lee Marvin and Roger Moore, was called Shout at the Devil. And in fact, that's similar in a way, closer to the truth, but based on a novel by Wilbur Smith. So they're both fictional accounts of historic facts. Anyway, so on to wargaming, naval wargaming. Excuse me. These four ships here are 1/3000th scale World War II vessels. Now, I think you can probably see immediately from that, this is one of the downsides of naval wargaming, that it's not particularly visually appealing. And the reason for that mainly is that these ships are in such small scale that it's very hard to see any detail on them. But the ranges of the guns and so on in the Second World War mean that on a 6x4 table, you really have to restrict yourself to ships of this size. But having said that, I have had such fun just playing even with those four ships alone. This is the Graf Spee. Excuse me a moment. Sorry about that. This is the Graf Spee, the Exeter, Ajax and Achilles, and those three British ships, or sorry, beg your pardon, so New Zealand and Australian ships in there. Those three Allied ships and that German ship were the participants in the Battle of the River Plate. So all you need is 4 very small, very cheap to purchase, easy to paint models, and you can refight an entire battle of the Second World War. But as I say, that is sort of the downside of it. Most naval games, it's a one-to-one representation, which means that the scale on the table means you have to play with small ships. So to give you the opposite extreme, I've got some 1/600th scale pre-dreadnought ships. So look at the difference in size there. This one I think is the Sevastopol. Yeah, that's the Sevastopol, which is a Russian ship, pre-dreadnought, that fought in the Russo-Japanese War from 1904 to 5. This ship here is the Asahi, which is a Japanese ship from the same period. Now, because the ranges of ships were so much shorter, you can just about get away with playing at this scale. You do still need to have a large table to play at this scale, but you can just about get away with it. But as you come down in scale, so here you have a 1/1000th scale model of the same ship, the Asahi, so you can see the difference in size, and it's much easier to play on a kind of conventional table with this sort of size. Got another one here from the same war, another Russian ship. This is the Tsarevich, which was a French-built ship built in Marseille. Probably got a photograph in the book of the Imperial Russian Navy. Let's show you what a beautiful ship she was. You probably can't see on this model, but you may be able to see on the photograph if I can find one quickly. There she is. Let's move this out of the way so I don't break the masts off. That's the Tsarevich, not painted in wartime colours. She's got sort of white paint on her there, but she had this incredible what's called a tumble home. So it's a sort of sloping hull, and that's based on age of sail philosophy, that if you have that slope on the hull, then a ship can't come alongside and crew leap off it to board. So even at the end of the 19th, beginning of the 20th century, ship designers were still taking into account the possibility that ships might be boarded. But in actual fact, by that time, the guns were so powerful that you only needed to come within half a mile of that ship and it would sink you, or vice versa. So there was no possibility of anyone boarding an enemy ship. But talking of the age of sail, another thing that you can have great fun with in naval wargaming is painting and rigging Napoleonic sailing ships. So if I get this close, this is a 100-gun Spanish ship of the line from the Napoleonic era. I was thinking of probably it might take me a while to do, is a sort of little video tutorial on how to rig the ships. But that is another element of wargaming, naval war games. You can get so absorbed in just the models themselves. I know you can with painting infantry figures and tanks and so on, but it's so relaxing to do. This is another one I did of a British ship, 98 gun ship. This is the Prince. I've actually put some little signal flag. I think that's signalling enemy sighted, I believe. I can't remember. And these are ships by Langton. These are 1/1200th, so they're a very similar scale to some of those ships I showed you earlier. You can see the difference in size. That is 1/1000th, that is 1/1200th, so not too different in scale. And incidentally as well, this goes back to something that I was talking to you about a moment ago, that you can have an absolutely absorbing game just with those two ships. You could spend all afternoon negotiating waves and wind and so on before you even get into cannon shot. And when you think of the number of guns these ships carried, over 100 guns on that one, 98 on this, that's more than a lot of Napoleonic armies took with them. So although it takes you a little while to paint and rig these ships, they represent massive amount of force. And I've also got some Langton models for the Renaissance, so I thought I'd just get one of those out and show you. Again, this is 1/1200th scale. It's a Muslim galley. So again, really nice figures. I haven't got so many of these, I've only got about 4 or 5 per side. But I do find Rod Langton's rules a little bit intense, really. I never really found a good set of rules to play for this period, so I don't tend to wargame it so much. But and I have never gone back as far as Roman galleys and so on. But you never know, maybe one day. So, as I say, that's mainly what the channel's going to be about. I may as well talk to you occasionally about DVDs. I have got some real problems personally with risking showing clips of films on my YouTube channel, because I'm hearing more and more horror stories about people's channels being pestered by copyright infringement claims and so on, and I don't want to risk losing my channel. But these kind of DVDs, all with naval themes and so on. So maybe I might. This is a TV series that was shown on Channel 4 some years ago, which was worth getting hold of if you ever find that. I got this one quite recently. These are 4 films starring Toshiro Mifune, who also starred as Yamamoto in this film of the Battle of Midway. But I hadn't realised, but there are these 4 films that are in this box. One of them is the Japanese version of the Battle of Midway, and it looks to me as though they use very similar. A lot of the cast are the same on the Japanese crews in this film, but it also looks to me as they used a lot of the same animation techniques and special effects and so on. There's one film in here to do with the Battle of Tsushima during the Russo-Japanese War, which unfortunately doesn't have any subtitles, so unless you can understand the Russian and Japanese, all you can do is really look at the images and the special effects, which are really good, considering it was made probably back in the 60s. Very good. There's another one about the Battle of Midway. There's another one about a fighter squadron fighting off American bomber raids in Japan. And the other one is about a sort of biography of Admiral Yamamoto. And that one, and the one about the Russo-Japanese War in particular, I thought were really good films. So anyway, that's to give you a rough idea of what I hope to cover in this series, and because it's not a particularly favourable time of the year, very windy and poor weather, I'm probably going to begin with Wargaming rather than a lot of out and about type films, but hopefully over the course of time the playlist will build up into quite a nice little archive of naval material. So thanks for watching, and see you again on the next video. Bye for now.